Welcome back to Small Caps. My name's Kerry Stevenson, and have I got a treat for you guys today? You will want to be sitting back, getting your coffee, and paying attention. Why? Because I have got the Managing Director of Meteoric Resources, Mr. Andrew Tunks, is with us in the room. And double trouble, ladies and gentlemen, double trouble. I've also got private investor, Tolga Kumova. Now, if you don't know either of these guys, sit back. You're in for a treat. Hey, boys, welcome to Small Caps.
Thank you very much, Kezo. It's great to be here and great to see your smiling face.
Thank you, sir. Now,
thanks, Kez.
Pretty exciting times at the moment, but before we get into what you're coming out to the market with, what I want to just allow our listeners to understand a bit about Meteoric Resources. Just briefly, who is Meteoric? And I know you're very excited about what we're about to talk about today, but let's just do a brief overview of Meteoric.
Meteoric is an Australian junior explorer. Been around for a long time, since 2004. I've been the MD since about the last 2.5, 3 years. We're a gold-focused explorer. We have a project, a high-grade, narrow, vein-hosted gold project in central Brazil, in the state of Mato Grosso. We've delivered some spectacular results from there over the last couple of years, and we've just finished another drilling program there, and I believe that there's a lot more news to come out of there. At the start of COVID this year, we realised that Brazil was going to be logistically difficult for us, and we took the option out to look for an Australian gold project. In July, we announced the acquisition of the Palm Springs Gold Project, and really today is the first announcement of our first results from Palm Springs. So it's an exciting time, yeah.
Very exciting time. Thank you for that little bit of background. So COVID, is the focus purely here in Australia now? Is Brazil just on the back burner because of COVID? Absolutely
not. No, we held a full, a slightly, not quite full, but a slightly reduced and slightly slower program than we had envisioned. We've delivered some, again this year, we've delivered some spectacular results in our drilling at Donna Maria, and we also believe that there's very strong indications of porphyry copper style mineralisation on site. So that's something for next year. But no, we've had a great year in Brazil, but there was clearly an imperative to get an Australian project as well, and so Palm Springs was something that we'd looked at before, and once we got involved, we've moved very quickly to get drilling because the northern wet season's coming, and we had to get going.
Okay, so let's just talk about where the Palm Springs project is, because you talk about the wet season. Whereabouts is it?
So we're in the far northwest of Western Australia, about 30 kilometres southeast of Halls Creek in the Kimberleys. So right on the edge of the Kimberley block. And for those people who like geology and like to know where that is, geologically we sit in what's called the Kimberley origin, but Palm Springs is interesting because it's on trend with the big deposits of the Tanami. So there's a big fault that comes through called the Central Tanami Shear Zone, and it comes right through into Halls Creek. And so Palm Springs sits on that structure. So we feel that also plays, not at the Palm Springs scale, but at the regional scale, we think that that's an important feature.
So I'm curious, before we get into some of these results that you're getting out at the moment, how did you find this project?
So it is interesting. We actually looked at this project about 2 years ago as we were looking at Brazil, and we didn't do it at the time because, to be honest, this project was a mess in terms of the data. There was no digital data and only paper copies of everything in like a shed. And when we looked at it 2 years ago, it was all just too hard. At the start of this year, when I decided I wanted an Australian project, we looked at the project again, and we had staff and we had time. It was in that time when no one was sure what COVID was going to do, and I had staff sitting around not doing much, and I said, let's go back to this project, let's pull out these paper sheets, and let's go back to 1990 and do it by hand, right? And so
wow.
And so we went back and we analysed this whole deposit by hand and re-digitised it. And once we did that, we realised that we were onto something. we realised that there's there's ore in the floor of the pit, and what today's result is all about is about where does that ore go.
Okay, so let's talk about, because I'm going to ask Tolga a couple of things, because Tolga, you love this story, so we'll get on to you in a moment. But let's talk about some of the results and why you're sitting there like a hot spring going, oh my God, Kez, I've got to tell everybody about this. So what's going on? So what's it showing you?
This was an open pit in the late 90s. We know that there's ore in the floor of the pit, and we know that there's unmined ore sitting there ready to go. Now, we don't know how much yet. So what this first exploration program was really to see what happens outside the pit. So there was only ever 4 holes to the south of the pit, so virtually nothing. And so this drilling, we've completed 27 holes, and we've started to go south of the pit. I've only released today the results of the first 7. Every one of them hit ore, and they hit some really good intercepts. So now this is not like Juruena. Brazil is narrow, very, very high grade. This is much more classic Australian open pit territory. So we've got intercepts like 56 metres of ore at 2.7 grams per tonne, which includes a high grade core of 18 at 5, or another hole, 45 metres at 2.3 grams a tonne, which has a high grade core of 5 at 10, 53 metres at 2.1, 8 at 10. There's some cracking results here, and they are classic, big, thick, robust zones. Not super high grades, like there's no individual hundreds and hundreds of grams at this stage. The maximum grade I think we might have got was around 60, but mostly it's in that very consistent range between sort of 1 gram and 4 grams. So we're averaging 2.5, let's say, but big, thick zones, 50 metres thick, and that's perfect for open pit.
What does that tell you about this area, Andrew? What does it tell you about what you're onto? Because to me, I've known you for a few years, and to me, there's this excitement that's around this at the moment. So what's it telling you?
Well, what it's telling me, and I think I know Tolga wants to speak about this later, and it's Tolga that's helped me visualise this, and hopefully it will help bring it into reality. Is that this is a near-term mining opportunity. This is not an explore it for 5 years.
Right.
These are granted mining leases. There is ore in the bottom of the pit. And what this stuff shows today is, and we've only drilled 360 metres away, but every hole has hit mineralisation so far. In the last hole of the last line, we hit visible gold, a nice big chunk of visible gold. So we know the system, I don't have those assays yet, but I know that the system is still going. So that now, if you take the pit into account and what we've extended, we're out to about 650 metres now of an ore zone. Now, I don't have a resource yet. I don't have any feed, but this is very exciting. And importantly, all of this sits on granted mining leases. Right. And that's a game changer. We don't have to apply for mining rights. We don't have to go through those very complex processes. Yes, we've got environmental stuff to do and consultations, but having mining licenses already in place is a huge thing. There are plants in the area, and I know, again, Tolga wants to talk about some of this stuff, but we just think that this is not a 5-year to 7-year exploration process. We're looking to take advantage of these remarkable conditions as soon as we can.
Well, Tolga, it's a pretty exciting time, isn't it? Now, we've brought you on to today's call, and thanks, Andrew. I want to come back to you in a second,
sure.
But I know Tolga's pretty excited as well. Now, you're on this call today because you are a shareholder in Meteoric, but you also know the gold mining sector pretty well. There's a lot of excitement around gold, and there's a lot of people that are looking at different projects, but this is one that's really piqued your interest. And I'd like to know, first of all, why and how you've got involved with Meteoric.
So maybe I'll answer the first question, the second question first. And I want to commend Andrew in the highest possible regard I possibly can for a managing director, especially with the experience he's just had. Andrew came to me about 2.5 years ago when when Meteoric had some cobalt licenses and that cobalt boom in Canada. And he effectively came and said to me, Tolga, I don't think these things are very good. I'm going to have a look at them. I'm going to analyze them. He was straight up with me because the previous MD was telling me it's amazing. It's going to be the best thing since sliced bread and all that sort of stuff. And he was basically pumping the tires of this thing. And Andrew was pretty openly saying, Tolga, I don't think I want to waste money on this. I want to find another asset. And we spoke about a couple of assets, this being one of them. And he's exactly what he said is exactly what happened. When he looked at it, he goes, look, it's all filed. It's all paperwork. We've really got to do a lot of work. I don't know if I can trust the information. And I've got to go back and do the work. And then Brazil came up, and those kinds of grades that we're looking at, you know, hundreds of grams per ton over 5 meters, 10 meters, it was really exciting, really interesting. Oh wait, I said, all right, let's go to Brazil. If that's what you want to do, if you've got some faith in it, we're off.
I can imagine you two in Brazil. No,
it's not terrible. It's not terrible.
No, it's fine. And went off and drilled those targets that he originally pointed out, and they were really exciting, really interesting, and they weren't going to be millions of ounces as they looked at the time. Went off to look at Nova Astro, and that looked really exciting. The core looked amazing. You thought this has got to be mineralized because there's artisanal workings all over the top of it, and it just didn't work out. Now the amount of flack that man copped, and so did I for that regard, as a result of it just not working out, can't mess with Mother Nature. She does what she does. Even though all indications were that it was amazing, didn't work out, copped it like hell. The stock went from, 1.5 cents to 6-7 cents, and then went back to 1.5 cents after having just raised, $5 or $6 million at 5 cents. $1 million of that was mine. So it hurt me more than anybody else, pretty much. But where I want to commend him is he just kept standing. Like most people put their tail between their head between their tail and just and disappear. And this guy didn't. And this is what managing directors that I want to back. People that have the balls to stand up and say, you know what, maybe I screwed up, I want to go again. And that's what he did. Now, people that tend to do that eventually get lucky. And I don't know if you call this luck, but he did the work, realized the opportunity, got all that paperwork out of the shed, out of those boxes and out of those files, got his team to digitize it, and says, Tolga, this is actually a real opportunity. Let's do it. What am I going to say? All right, well, it looks really interesting. You believe in it again. I'm going to back you again, which we did. And now look at it. Now he's sitting there. He's got 50 meters of, 2.7 and it's extending, and every single hole is hit mineralization. The last hole he's hit is invisible gold. So it's opening up. It's going to be better grades at depth. It's all falling into place. And I want to just talk a little bit about my strategy. When I invest in these little junior explorers, once I put my money in, that's actual physical cash that I don't consider cash until they find something. All right. And the same thing happened with Bellevue. When I was putting money in, it was basically sunk until Steve Parsons goes, I've got a discovery, Tolga, I'm on. And right now he's telling me the same thing. Now it's a different deposit to Bellevue and probably a different outcome in the end, but it's now I'm actually looking and saying, I can put my hand on my heart and say, this is actually going to have a return. It's actually going to be an opportunity. And the reason being, I think this particular opportunity happens quicker and faster. There's a plant that's not too far from the project, which doesn't have much of a mine life, which is either going to be dismantled and sold to another group, or some kind of deal needs to be done on it. So I think this asset is not 10 years to production. I think it's 5 years to production. I think it's a hell of a lot quicker, considering what he said was earlier. It's on a mining license. There's a plant that's down the road. It's just a matter of doing some kind of negotiation, some kind of deal with that group at some point. I don't know what that looks like in the end. I haven't started that. I'm assuming I haven't started that process. But once you find out what you're sitting on, and Tunksy doesn't really know what he's sitting on just yet. He just knows he's onto something, And
he's pretty excited, Tolga. He's pretty excited. But
I'm excited. And the reason why I say he doesn't know what he's sitting on, this thing's just starting to throw up some curveballs. There's a drill hole to the west, which has hit another lode or another limb, which he doesn't really understand yet, but it's there. So it's going west, it's going south, it's getting high grade at depth, it's hitting gold, visible gold at depth. So it could be anything at this point. And the best part about it is, starts from surface. Guys before us went and basically put the pit in, did the cutback, These guys are going to cost them, basically a very small number to go and do another cutback and going straight to ore. And then you're just chasing this thing down. Well, down at the moment, down to the south, but it could be to the west, it could be to the east, it could be in any direction. It could be multiple loads. It looks like it's folding. It's doing all sorts of stuff. So it's going to be a mine. It's just a matter of, in my opinion, I should say that. In my opinion, it's going to definitely be a mine. And it's not going to be 5 years. It'll be a couple.
Tolga, I just want to ask you, because you said before that, you're really proud of Andrew and what he's doing. Do you back people or do you back projects, or is it a bit of both? Because there's a lot of investors out there at the moment that, quite frankly, are not quite sure. There's a lot of companies out there, and there's a lot of things that people are looking at. I'd like to just know from you before we dive back into Meteoric, what do you look at?
I have a saying. Yep. I say this all the time. It's not the man that makes the project. It's the project that makes the man, right? And this is when I look at assets, this is what I'm looking at. But when junior explorers, junior companies, usually a project isn't a project yet. So you have to back the people. They've got to be hungry. They've got to be passionate. They've got to be able to keep standing when they fail, because most of these companies do, right? So most of these junior explorers you're invested in, they're probably not going to succeed. So you need to make sure the man is going to be able to stand up and go again. And he's got to have enough ideas, enough intelligence. And I go with Tunks' background. The guy's a doctor, for crying out loud. So he's smart enough to go, all right, that might work, this might not work. And doing the probability in his own brain real quick as to what's going to be economic and what's not is someone that you want to be involved with or associated with. And I can honestly tell you, a lot of companies on the ASX that I look at just don't have that person. And yeah, most of the time, 99% of the time, I say no to deals, no to opportunities. And when I do, it's because I kind of am getting a gist from the MD. And over the last, to be honest with you, over the last 6 months, it's been on Zoom, trying to get a gist of someone's, is in passion. But yeah, that's what I look for, and that's what Andrew's got, and that's why I think this project will get up and going. I don't know if it gets taken out. I don't know if it gets built. I don't know how it unfolds, but now it has a serious amount of value.
Tolga, I love hearing your passion as well, because I've got two guys that are very passionate about what they do, what they invest in, and Dr. Andrew Tunks.
Thank you, Kerry.
Get it right, Kez.
Yeah, exactly. Dr. Andrew Tunks. I mean, Tolga just said before, it is passion that you have and that you don't stop at the first hurdle. And, I understand that, and it's fantastic. You've only drilled 7 holes.
No, we've drilled 27. We've only got results for 7.
I beg your pardon, you've done 27. So when are the results for the next 20 holes coming out?
Well, they're on, most of that is already at the lab, probably 2 to 3 weeks away for the next set of numbers. And then we're actually, I think the last samples from site leave today. There was just a few left over. So from Halls Creek down to Perth is a long way. Takes the truck around a week to get there. They're clearly, they just backload our stuff. And so, and then the lab turnaround is about 3 weeks. So we would be expecting to deliver results in either 2 to 3 more tranches, releases with drilling results. Just not sure exactly the timing yet, but I would expect another release certainly late in November and then into December. That and really we're at the mercy of the lab and the transport now, but there'll be results from Brazil as well in that time. So there's a constant flow of results from us coming through to Christmas, and then excitingly about what comes next for us. I mean, obviously that's predicated on what comes out of this next drilling, but one of the things that we've seen in this core is that there's an intimate relationship between the gold and the sulfides. And no one's ever done geophysics here. No one's done IP. So there's some really obvious things that I think we should be doing. So often, this was an ore body that was discovered because it was sticking out of the ground, right? Back in the 1980s. It was like, there was gold sticking out of the ground, and they went and they did the obvious stuff. And they mined down that and they took that out in a pit until it got a little bit too deep at the gold price, etc. The gold price has gone up 600% since then. So there's a lot, that opens the field up. But for all we know, there's parallel structures that didn't outcrop, or, you know, so there's a lot of opportunity here, I believe. It was significantly underexplored. There's no drilling outside the pit, virtually. There's a small resource put in by Northern Star, about 5 or 6 kilometres away, but there's really not much testing here. So there's a lot to do. And we think we're onto something, but we're not sure exactly what it is yet, and how big it is, and how far, etc. And that does take a little bit of time, but because it starts in the pit and the pit's already pre-stripped, we've got a huge head start. So one of our goals over the wet season is to try and get a permit to pump out the pit. It's full of water at the moment. Well, it's not full of water at the moment because the wet season's just about to start, but it will fill up over the wet. At the end of the wet, we can pump that out. There's a tailings dam here already. I mean, this used to be a mine, 97%, 95 to 97% gold recoveries. We already know that. So we're not worrying about the Met, right? Normally when you at this stage of a project, you're thinking, oh, wow, does the Met work? Well, we know that it works. We've got to do more test work, yep. We've got to quantify that, yep. But we already know. So there's a lot, we've got so much going for us here, you know, and that excites me, you know. So we just can't wait to get into it. So there'll be announcements too, not just results, but what are our plans for next year? How are we going to progress this? So there's a lot to come from Meteoric for the rest of this year.
Well, yeah, and I know Tolga wants to jump in. What was that, Tolga?
I'm just listening to him talk, and the more and more he's speaking and the more and more he's explaining, it's actually reminding me of Bellevue and Steve Parsons at the very start. When he put the first couple of drill holes in, he's like, oh, you know, Tolga, I reckon we can get to about 500,000 ounces here. Whereas it was his first comment. And he's like, and this is why I say it's relating to me every time he says something. He said the same thing. I've got the underground. I'm going to dewater that at some point, and I've got an open pit and I've got a place to put it. I don't need to worry about the metallurgy because it's already done before. Someone else already mined it. All these factors that he's going into is what I've heard before.
It's a deja vu moment.
Yeah, when I watched that, I never forget it, I watched that stock go from, first started buying it at 8 cents. He hit the first holes and went to 12, 13, and then came back to 9 because people were like, oh, it's not that big, it won't be real. Then I was like, oh, so he put a couple more holes in it, a few more announcements, went to 15, 20. And people were like, oh, you know, maybe he'll get to, I don't know, 500,000 ounces if he's lucky, blah, blah, blah. And sort of just kept unfolding, and the project just kept delivering and kept delivering. And he started hitting visible gold in most of his holes, and he understood the relationship with pyrrhotite and pyrite and all the high grade areas. So I'm thinking, I don't know, I haven't looked at the information close enough, but I'm assuming it's a similar type of situation. So is a visible gold associated with pyrrhotite?
The visible gold at this stage appears to be associated with late stage quartz veins, and yes, there is pyrrhotite and pyrite, but we're not. Yeah, I mean, it's early days. I haven't.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's early days for him as well. I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but yeah, just the whole strategy, the whole plan, just reminds me of it. So there you go.
It takes a while to find things like this, and when they do, it does create a lot of excitement. Both of you have mentioned before that you know, you can explore so these things take time to develop and to get to a position where you're actually mining. But there was a comment earlier that you might be, you know, fast tracking this a little bit. Is that right, Andrew, or do you need to do a lot more exploration? And
look, ultimately we do need to do more work, absolutely. But you know, there's already 30,000 meters drilled here. A lot of that is unmined. Now, so yes, we need to prove that drilling is right under the current JORC code. We've already extended it. We will need to do infill drilling, but the Met is largely known. There was a plant on site, and this had produced 50,000 ounces of gold in a year and a half. So there's a lot known, and the fact that they are mining leases already granted means that you don't have to go through that convoluted process of applying for a mining lease, which takes years. So I'm not saying it's going to be tomorrow, but I do think that there are a lot of, and not shortcuts is not the right word, but there are a lot of avenues where we can push this ahead fast. And you know, there's a lot of information in the databases around this deposit, the metallurgy and etc. So Einstein once said, I can only see so far because I stand on the shoulders of giants. And he was referring to Newton, but a lot of what we have here is historical information, which is quite amazing, and that gives us a huge head start.
Okay, so just to finish up, I'll start with Tolga and I'll finish with you, Dr. Andrew Tunks. Tolga, what would you say to people that are listening to this today about Meteoric Resources? ASX code, ladies and gentlemen, is MEI. Like anything, we don't want to overpromise and underdeliver, but what would you say to people who are listening to this today?
Yeah, it's an exciting set of numbers. It reconfirmed everything that was there before, which were all the historical results. The historical results were all amazing. So in my mind, it was like, are they actually real? And now they've hit these numbers. They are actually real and they are extending. So for me, the most exciting part is going to be to watch this thing unfold. And it'll take the next 12, 18 months to really get a proper understanding of what's sitting there. And it's probably not just this structure. It's probably other opportunities on those licenses. So they're going to be interesting. And I also wouldn't write off Brazil just yet. And I mean, the reason why I was most excited about Brazil was the porphyry potential. You've got these incredibly high grade veins of gold shooting off it. There is a porphyry structure somewhere there. They've got evidence of it. So yeah, that could be a potential screamer in the background as well. Who knows? I'm excited, and it's actually going to be real. Like that's more so the thing for me.
And I think it's a smart managing director that realizes, that I hate to use the word, but I'm going to have to use it, boys, that pivots when we have something like COVID and says Brazil's going to be a little bit tricky. And now you have two opportunities, both which look very strong and very, very interesting. Dr. Andrew Tunks, let's leave the final word up to you, sir. Lots of news flow coming out, lots of results coming forward. What would you say to people who are listening to this today?
Well, I would encourage investors out there to, if you're interested in exploration and interested in that process and what's going on, then I'd say join us. We are a real exploration company. We're looking to progress towards development, but it's an exciting adventure. And I would say to shareholders, get on the register, get some shares, join us on this adventure. It's going to be a great ride. So come along. I'd love to have you.
Well, guys, I've had two very passionate boys on the call today. It's been fantastic to see you both. Really looking forward to the upcoming results. Even more, the ones today were spectacular. All the best for the future. And as I said before, ladies and gentlemen, Meteoric Resources, ASX code is MEI. Lots of results coming out, lots of information run by Dr. Andrew Tunks, investor Tolga Kumova. What better can you do than take a look at it? We'll see you next time on Small Caps.
Thanks for your kind words, Tolga.
Sorry. See you guys.
Thanks, guys.